She was exhausted, invisible, and a size 18 in an industry that demanded absolute perfection. When New York's most ruthless syndicate boss demanded to know what she wanted most in the world, she smirked and joked, a day off. 12 hours later, a solid titanium American Express Centurion card arrived at her apartment. The air inside the obsidian room always smelled heavily of seared Wagyu truffle oil and old money. Located in the deepest, most exclusive pocket of Tribeca, it was the kind of restaurant where the waitstaff were expected to look like runway models and act like ghosts. Chloe Higgins fit neither description. She was a solid size 18, with thick curves, a sharp tongue, and a permanent ache in her lower back. Her manager, a draconian woman named Claire, never missed an opportunity to remind Chloe that she was a visual anomaly in their high-end establishment. "Tuck your blouse in, Chloe," Claire would hiss, trailing her like a hawk. "We sell elegance here, not comfort. Try to take up less space." But Chloe took up space unapologetically. She had to, surviving double shifts on her feet while carrying trays of baccarat crystal and dodging the wandering hands of Wall Street executives required a thick skin and an undeniable presence. She was invisible when they wanted a servant, but glaringly obvious when they wanted someone to belittle. It was a Tuesday night entirely unremarkable until the front doors opened and the atmospheric pressure in the dining room noticeably dropped. Gabriel Rossi had arrived. He didn't walk into a room, he possessed it. Dressed in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that clung perfectly to his broad shoulders, Rossi was the reputed head of the most organized, violently efficient crime syndicate on the eastern seaboard. Rumors surrounding him were whispered in back alleys and FBI boardrooms alike. He had dismantled the reigning Italian families by his 30th birthday, and he didn't leave loose ends. Accompanied by his underboss Dante and 2 other men, whose suits couldn't completely hide the bulk of their shoulder holsters, Gabriel was led immediately to the secluded corner booth. Chloe was working table 4, actively ignoring the agonizing throb in her swollen feet when she saw Toby, the newest and youngest busboy, approach Gabriel's table with a tray of water glasses and an open bottle of Opus 1 Cabernet. Toby's hands were shaking so violently they looked like they were vibrating. "Don't do it, kid." Chloe thought, her eyes widening. "Breathe." But Toby didn't breathe. His foot caught the edge of a thick Persian rug. His wrist buckled, and the tray tipped. A heavy splash of dark crimson wine rained directly onto the table, splashing across Gabriel Rossi's knee and ruining the fine wool of his trousers. The restaurant went dead silent. The faint jazz music playing through the overhead speakers suddenly felt completely inappropriate. Toby dropped to his knees, hyperventilating. I'm so sorry, sir. Oh my God, please, I'm sorry." Dante, standing near the edge of the booth, didn't say a word. He simply reached inside his tailored jacket, his eyes locked on the weeping teenager. Chloe didn't think. Instinct forged by years of protecting her younger siblings and surviving a city that chewed up the weak kicked in. She pushed her heavy frame through the dining room, stepping directly between Dante and the terrified boy on the floor. "Get a mop, Toby," Chloe ordered, her voice cutting through the deadly silence like a whip. "Now, go." Toby scrambled away, leaving Chloe standing alone in the crosshairs of New York's most dangerous men. She grabbed a thick linen napkin from the adjacent table and looked directly down at Gabriel Rossi. She didn't apologize. She didn't cower. She just evaluated the stain. "I can offer to have those dry cleaned, Mr. Rossi." Chloe said, her tone utterly flat, stripped of the fawning desperation he was undoubtedly used to. "But club soda won't fix wool, and we both know you aren't waiting around in the VIP lounge in your boxers while I scrub them." Dante stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Watch your mouth." Gabriel held up a single manicured hand. Dante froze instantly, stepping back into the shadows. Gabriel leaned back against the leather upholstery, ignoring the wine seeping into his trousers. His dark, calculating eyes swept over Chloe. He took in her flushed face, the strands of brown hair escaping her messy bun, the heavy curve of her hips, and the absolute lack of terror in her posture. "You aren't shaking," Gabriel observed softly. "I work 60 hours a week, sir," Chloe replied, tucking her serving tray under her arm. "Fear requires a level of energy I simply don't have right now." A faint, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at the corner of Gabriel's mouth. Women usually fell into two categories around him, the ones who threw themselves at his wealth and the ones who trembled at his reputation. The plus-sized waitress, staring him down with tired, unimpressed eyes, was an entirely new species. "What's your name?" he asked. "Chloe." "Well, Chloe," Gabriel murmured, leaning slightly forward, resting his elbows on the table. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist caught the dim candlelight. "You seem remarkably unfazed by standing in the line of fire." "I'm a big girl, Mr. Rossi," Chloe said, shifting her weight to her less painful foot. She refused to break eye contact. "It takes a hell of a lot more than a spilled drink and a dirty look to knock me off balance." Gabriel stared at her for a long, silent moment. The rest of the restaurant held its collective breath. Finally he spoke, his voice dropping an octave meant only for her. "Tell me something, Chloe," he said, his gaze piercing right through her exhaustion. "If you could have anything right now, anything in the world, what would it be?" Chloe let out a short, cynical laugh, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. She thought about her mountain of medical debt. She thought about her mother's unpaid hospital bills. She thought about the cheap, sagging mattress waiting for her in Brooklyn. "A day off," she joked dryly, turning to walk back to the kitchens. "And maybe a nap that doesn't end in an eviction notice." She didn't look back to see Gabriel Rossi's reaction. If she had, she would have seen the syndicate boss pull out his phone, his dark eyes locked intensely on her retreating figure. Wednesday morning broke over Brooklyn with a grey, unforgiving light. Chloe groaned as her alarm clock shrieked at 6 a.m. Every joint in her body screamed in protest as she rolled over the springs of her cheap mattress, digging into her ribs. She stared at the ceiling, mentally calculating her bank balance. Rent was due in 3 days. Her mother's leftover debt from Mount Sinai Hospital was in collections. She needed to be on the subway in 40 minutes for the lunch shift, and the thought of squeezing her swollen feet back into her regulation black heels made her want to weep. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed through her tiny apartment. Chloe frowned. It wasn't the rhythmic banging of her landlord, Mr. Henderson. She pulled on a thick, oversized fleece robe, tied it tightly around her waist, and padded to the door. Looking through the peephole, she saw a man standing in the hallway. He wasn't a delivery driver. He was wearing a sharp, tailored black suit and an earpiece. She unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door open. "Can I help you?" "Chloe Higgins?" the man asked. His voice was clipped professional. "Yes." The man handed her a sleek, heavy black box, slightly larger than a passport. "Sign here, please." Confused, Chloe scrawled her name on his digital tablet. The man nodded, once turned on his heel and walked down the crumbling hallway without another word. Chloe locked the door and carried the box to her cramped kitchen counter. The packaging was immaculate matte, black with no return address. She pried the lid off. Inside, resting on a bed of dark velvet, was an envelope, and beneath the envelope was a card. Chloe picked it up. It was heavy, cold, solid titanium. It was an American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card, and embossed across the bottom in silver lettering was her name, Chloe Higgins. Her breath hitched. She dropped it on the counter as if it had burned her, her hands shaking. She ripped open the heavy cardstock envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on impossibly thick stationery. Take the day off. Eviction is no longer on the menu. GR no. Chloe whispered to the empty room. No, no, no. This is a joke. This is an elaborate, cruel joke. But the weight of the titanium on her counter was undeniable. Gabriel Rossi, a man she had spoken to for exactly 3 minutes, had just handed her a blank check to the universe. There was no preset spending limit on a Centurion card. It was limitless. Panic and adrenaline warred in her chest. If she used it, she was tethering herself to a monster. She was accepting Mafia money. But as she looked down at a final notice from a debt collector sitting next to her coffee maker, a reckless, desperate wave of exhaustion washed over her. Just to test it, she told herself. Just to see if it's real. She grabbed her laptop, her fingers trembling as she booted it up. She logged into her Mount Sinai patient portal. The screen flashed her mother's outstanding balance in bright, aggressive red numbers, $14,680. Chloe selected Pay in Full. She typed in the 16 digits from the heavy titanium card, the expiration date, and the security code. She squeezed her eyes shut and clicked Submit. She waited for the error message. She waited for the fraud alert. Instead, the screen refreshed. A green check mark appeared. Payment approved. Balance $0. Chloe let out a choked sob, falling back into her kitchen chair. $14,000. Gone. Evaporated in a single second. A manic kind of energy possessed her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't broke. She wasn't struggling. She threw off her robe, dragged herself into the shower, and put on her best wrap dress, a deep burgundy number that actually flattered her curves instead of hiding them. She walked out of her apartment building and didn't turn toward the subway. Instead, she hailed a yellow cab. Fifth Avenue, she told the driver. Her first stop was a high-end orthopedics and luxury footwear boutique. She was done with cheap shoes that mangled her toes. When she walked into the polished, marble-floored store, the two thin, immaculately dressed saleswomen immediately gave her the look. It was a look Chloe knew well, the quick, dismissive, up-and-down assessment that determined she was too big, too poor, and too out of place to bother helping. "May I help you?" one of them asked, her tone dripping with polite condescension. "Our wide-fit selection is quite limited." Chloe didn't blush. She didn't shrink. Gabriel Rossi's voice echoed in her head. "You aren't shaking." "I want the custom leather loafers," Chloe said, pointing to a display case. "Measure me. I want them tailored to my exact arch, and I want 2 pairs. One in black, one in chestnut." The saleswoman offered a tight, patronizing smile. "Ma'am, those are $3,000 a pair, and custom fitting takes—" Chloe reached into her purse and slapped the heavy, solid titanium black card onto the glass display counter. The metal made a sharp, authoritative clack against the glass. Both saleswomen stared at the card. The condescension instantly vanished from their faces, replaced by a pale, wide-eyed shock. In the luxury world, the Centurion card was a god. "Right away, Ms. Higgins." The manager suddenly appeared, rushing out from the back room. "Champagne while you wait." An hour later, Chloe walked out onto the bustling sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, carrying 2 exquisite shopping bags, her feet wrapped in temporary, cloud-like, supportive walking shoes the store had practically begged her to take for free. She felt invincible. She felt seen. But as she stepped toward the curb to hail another cab, the illusion of safety violently shattered. A massive armored black Mercedes G-Wagon screeched to a halt directly in front of her, blocking the crosswalk. Before Chloe could react, the back doors flew open. 2 enormous men wearing cheap dark leather jackets stepped out. They didn't move like Gabriel's men. They were rougher, completely lacking the polished, tailored grace of the Italian syndicate. One of them reached out, grabbing Chloe roughly by her upper arm. His grip was like a steel vice, biting into her flesh. "Hey, get off me!" Chloe shouted, thrashing against his weight, but she was overpowered instantly. "Quiet!" The man snarled, his voice thick with a harsh, icy Russian accent. A third man stepped out of the vehicle. He was older, with silver hair and a jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He looked Chloe up and down, a cruel, mocking smile spreading across his face. "So," the older man sneered, stepping dangerously close. "Victor Volkov would like a word. We have a mole inside American Express who flags high-value transactions. Imagine our surprise when Gabriel Rossi's private, untraceable account suddenly paid off a hospital bill for a waitress in Brooklyn." Chloe's blood ran cold. The card. It was tracked. "Rossi is a machine." The Russian continued, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight as his men shoved Chloe toward the open door of the SUV. "He has no family, no wives, no weaknesses, but it seems the great Italian king finally has a soft spot." He laughed, an ugly grating sound, looking at Chloe's fuller figure. "And a rather large one at that. Get her in the car." The black Mercedes SUV smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap cologne. Chloe was wedged between the two massive henchmen in the back seat, her wrists bound tightly with thick plastic zip ties. She stared blankly at the partition, separating them from the driver, her mind racing through a panicked blur of survival instincts. She wasn't a stranger to rough neighborhoods, but this was an entirely different stratosphere of danger. The vehicle finally lurched to a halt after what felt like an hour of sharp turns and jarring stops. The doors were yanked open, and rough hands dragged her out into the freezing air. They were in an abandoned industrial sector, surrounded by rust-streaked shipping containers and dilapidated warehouses. The smell of salt water and decaying fish told her they were somewhere near the Brooklyn Navy Yard. "Keep moving," one of the men grunted, shoving a heavy hand between her shoulder blades. They forced her inside a cavernous, dimly lit meatpacking warehouse. The air was frigid, biting through her burgundy wrap dress. Rows of empty meat hooks swayed gently from the ceiling, clinking together like macabre wind chimes. In the center of the vast concrete floor sat a single metal folding chair under a harsh halogen work light. Victor Volkov was waiting for her, leaning against a rusted steel table, peeling an apple with a wickedly sharp hunting knife. "Sit her down," Victor commanded. The men shoved Chloe into the chair, tying her ankles to the metal legs. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out as the hard plastic cut into her skin. She looked down at her brand-new $3,000 leather loafers, now scuffed with warehouse dirt. A hysterical, bubbling laugh threatened to escape her throat. "Of course. The universe finally throws me a bone, and it comes with a death sentence." "You find something funny, little bird?" Victor asked, taking a slow bite of the apple. He walked over the heavy thud of his boots, echoing in the empty space. "Gabriel Rossi is a ghost. He leaves no paper trails. He uses shell companies to buy his coffee. And yet this morning, a Centurion card, linked directly to his personal holding company, pays off a hospital bill." Victor stopped inches from her face, his pale blue eyes calculating. "So I ask myself, who is this woman? She is not a supermodel. She is not an assassin. She is a heavy-set waitress from Tribeca, which means she must be something entirely different. A secret wife, a beloved mistress, or perhaps you know where he is keeping the bearer bonds from the docks." Chloe took a deep, shaky breath, meeting the Russian's gaze. "You're an idiot." One of the henchmen stepped forward and backhanded her across the face. The crack echoed sharply. Chloe's head snapped to the side, the metallic taste of blood instantly blooming on her tongue. "Careful," Victor chuckled, holding up a hand to his man. "Don't break his favorite toy before we get to play." Chloe spit a mouthful of blood onto the concrete floor. She turned her eyes back to Victor, her fear crystallizing into pure, white-hot anger. I'm not his toy. I met Gabriel Rossi for exactly 3 minutes. A kid spilled wine on him. I told him I wouldn't wash his pants. He asked what I wanted. I said a day off and he sent the card. That's it. You kidnapped a civilian over a dry cleaning dispute. Victor stared at her. Then he threw his head back and laughed a harsh, grating sound. A dry cleaning dispute. You are a terrible liar, Miss Higgins. Gabriel Rossi doesn't do charity. He is a sociopath. He doesn't give limitless credit cards to women who talk back to him. Then you clearly don't know him as well as you think you do. Chloe shot back. Victor's smile vanished. He pulled a heavy encrypted satellite phone from his coat pocket and dialed a sequence of numbers. He pressed the speaker button and set the phone on the steel table. It rang twice. Then a click. Volkov. Gabriel Rossi's voice filled the warehouse. It wasn't angry. It wasn't raised. It was unnervingly smooth, chillingly calm, and carried the quiet promise of absolute violence. You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why my tracking algorithm shows my property sitting in a decommissioned warehouse in the Navy Yard. Chloe's breath hitched at the sound of his voice. Victor grinned, leaning over the phone. Your property, Gabriel. Are we talking about the titanium card or the pretty little waitress holding it? Because I have both. A heavy, suffocating silence stretched over the line. I see, Gabriel finally murmured. I want the shipping routes out of Newark. Victor demanded, his accent thickening with adrenaline. I want the docks, Gabriel. All of them. Sign them over to the Volkov family, and perhaps I will let Miss Higgins go back to serving your pasta. If not, I will start mailing her back to you. I think I'll start with those lovely, soft curves. Is she hurt? Gabriel asked. The temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Victor glanced at the bruise forming on Chloe's cheek. Just a scratch, to show her we are serious. Put her on, Gabriel ordered. Victor grabbed the phone and held it up to Chloe's face. Speak. Chloe swallowed hard. Mr. Rossi. Chloe, Gabriel said, and for a fraction of a second, the lethal ice in his voice fractured, revealing something raw and intense beneath it. Are you bleeding? Just my pride, Chloe rasped, forcing a bravado she didn't feel. And my new shoes. Honestly, if you're going to give someone a limitless credit card, you should probably warn them it comes with Russian stalkers. A low, dark chuckle vibrated through the speaker. You aren't shaking, are you, Chloe? Not yet, she whispered. Good, Gabriel said. Close your eyes. The call disconnected. Victor frowned, staring at the dead screen of the phone. What does that mean? Hello, Rossi. Before Victor could dial back, the massive steel doors at the far end of the warehouse didn't just open, they violently exploded inward. The concussive shockwave knocked Victor off his feet. Dust and concrete shrapnel rained down from the ceiling as the heavy metal doors buckled under the force of military-grade breaching charges. Suddenly the warehouse plunged into absolute darkness. Someone had cut the main power line. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, obeying Gabriel's last command, as all hell broke loose around her. The deafening roar of suppressed automatic weapons echoed off the concrete walls. There were shouts in Russian, followed by sickening thuds, and the sharp, bright flashes of muzzle fire cutting through the pitch-black air. It was chaotic, but it wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Gabriel's men moved with terrifying synchronized precision. Within 60 seconds the gunfire ceased, replaced only by the groans of dying men and the hollow dripping of melting ice. Emergency backup lights flickered on, casting the warehouse in a dim, blood-red glow. Chloe opened her eyes. The two massive henchmen who had brought her there were lying motionless on the floor. Viktor Volkov was pinned against a shipping container, his shoulder bleeding profusely, staring down the barrel of a customized Sig Sauer held by Dante. And walking slowly across the concrete, wearing a pristine black tactical vest over a tailored dress shirt, was Gabriel Rossi. He didn't look at Viktor. He didn't look at the carnage. His dark, consuming gaze was locked entirely on Chloe. He dropped his weapon to his side and stepped into her personal space. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a folding knife and quickly sliced through the thick plastic ties, binding her wrists and ankles. As soon as her hands were free, the adrenaline that had been keeping Chloe upright violently crashed. Her shoulders slumped, and a violent tremor overtook her body. She pitched forward, expecting to hit the unforgiving concrete. She didn't. Gabriel caught her. His large, strong hands gripped her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. He shrugged off his heavy, cashmere-lined overcoat and wrapped it securely around her shoulders, completely engulfing her in his warmth and the scent of expensive sandalwood. "I've got you," Gabriel murmured, his lips brushing against her hair. "You're safe." Chloe buried her face in his chest, her hands fisting the fabric of his shirt. They wanted Newark." "They aren't getting Newark," Gabriel said softly. He slowly turned his head to look at Viktor, who was watching the scene with wide, terrified eyes. "They aren't getting anything ever again." Gabriel nodded once to Dante. Dante pulled the trigger. Chloe flinched at the noise, but Gabriel held her tighter, shielding her face from the violence. "Come on," he said effortlessly, lifting her off the ground into his arms as if her weight meant absolutely nothing to him. "We're leaving." "I can walk," Chloe protested weakly, her cheeks burning. "I'm too heavy." "Chloe." Gabriel interrupted his voice, a low, commanding rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. "I can lift a 200-pound man by his throat. You weigh nothing to me. Let me carry you." She stopped fighting. For the first time in her life, she let someone else carry the weight. Gabriel set her down gently on a massive, curved velvet sofa. He disappeared into a wet bar and returned a moment later with a glass of amber liquid, pressing it into her trembling hands. "Drink," he ordered softly. "It will help with the shock." Chloe took a sip. It was the smoothest, most expensive bourbon she had ever tasted. It burned a warm path down her throat, settling her nerves. She looked around the cavernous, immaculate penthouse, and then up at the billionaire Mafia boss standing over her. "Why did you do it?" Chloe asked, her voice finally steady. She pulled his oversized coat tighter around her. "The card, the rescue. Viktor was right. You don't do charity." Gabriel pulled up a leather armchair and sat directly across from her, leaning his elbows on his knees. The harsh lighting of the penthouse highlighted the sharp, aristocratic lines of his jaw and the intense, obsessive darkness in his eyes. "I am surrounded by people who are terrified of me, or people who want something from me," Gabriel said slowly, his gaze tracing the curve of her jaw, lingering on the bruise the Russian had left. His jaw clenched in lingering anger before he forced himself to relax. "Every smile I see is bought. Every compliment is a calculation. And then I walked into a restaurant, and a woman who works 60 hours a week on swollen feet looked me dead in the eye and told me to clean up my own mess." Chloe blinked, stunned. "You gave me limitless money because I was rude to you. I gave it to you because you were real." Gabriel corrected his voice, dropping to a hypnotic whisper. "You didn't shrink yourself to fit into that pathetic restaurant. You didn't make yourself small when my men stepped up to you. You took up space, Chloe. Beautiful, unapologetic space. And I suddenly realized I wanted you taking up space in my life." Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. The way he was looking at her, it wasn't the way men usually looked at her. He wasn't fetishizing her. He wasn't settling for her. He was looking at her like she was the most valuable, magnificent thing he had ever stolen. "I can't be bought, Mr. Rossi," Chloe said, her voice shaking slightly, but her chin held high. "Not with titanium cards and not with bourbon." A slow, devastating smile spread across Gabriel's face. He reached out his knuckles, gently grazing her unbruised cheek. "I know," he murmured, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. "I don't want to buy you, Chloe. I want to partner with you. I want to show you the world you deserve. You've spent your entire life serving people who aren't worthy to look at you. It's time someone served you." Chloe looked into the dark, dangerous eyes of Gabriel Rossi and knew her life as a struggling waitress was permanently over. She had asked for a day off. Instead, she had been handed an empire. She leaned into his touch, a small, daring smile playing on her lips. "Well," Chloe whispered, "I suppose I'll need a new wardrobe if I'm going to be partnering with the mob." Gabriel laughed, a genuine deep sound that filled the penthouse. "Anything you want, Mayor Regina, limitless." Wow, what an incredible journey for Chloe. From a struggling waitress to the queen of an empire, she proved that authenticity is the ultimate power. If you loved this intense Mafia romance and want more thrilling stories of unexpected love and danger, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Share this video with your friends and tell us your favorite moment in the comments below.